When medicine meets the law, it's time for the doctor's court, which is now in session.
I'm the bailiff.
Oh. So this case today, I'll tell you, we go to the hospital to improve our health, but now Seattle Children's Hospital is on the defense, accused of doing the opposite. A class action lawsuit against Seattle Children's Hospital alleges the hospital facilities were infested with mold. But instead of fixing the situation, the hospital tried to cover it up. The suit claims 14 patients became ill and 6 children died due to the mold infestation. Seattle Children's Hospital shut down its operating rooms twice in 2019 after air tests detected Aspergillus mold. 1 patient died and 6 more were sickened in that outbreak. But there were earlier outbreaks between 2001 and 2014 that sickened patients and reportedly claimed 5 lives. The lawsuit does not blame doctors or nurses at the hospital, rather the administration for failing to clean up the mold and keeping the problem hidden. 4 families are seeking class action status and unspecified damages, and more may join. Attorney Anahita Sedaghatfar joins us with a legal perspective on this case. Thanks so much for being here. And obviously, anytime you talk about children and death, it's a really tough topic. Yeah. In this case against the hospital, how do things look for the hospital?
It's not looking good for the hospital because the allegations are that they knew about this back in 2001. And the hospital actually, they're denying that allegation, but there's evidence that they knew this in 2005 in another lawsuit, and yet they took no efforts to try to remediate the issue.
Because with the lawsuit in 2005, it was settled in 2008 confidentially,
yes.
right?
Yes, and in that lawsuit, they were expressly presented with evidence that there was mold contamination in the entire hospital air filtration system. And so to be able to say that, we didn't know about it, that's not going to be a good argument. So there's strong evidence the hospital knew, and they did absolutely nothing about it. In fact, they tried to cover it up from the evidence.
In this case, are they going to have to prove that the illness and the deaths, in fact, were due to this particular mold? Causation,
Exactly, and that's why the CEO of the hospital did a press conference. He apologized, he accepted responsibility, but he also said, look, we didn't connect the dots. We didn't know that this mold caused these deaths, these injuries. Now, I can tell you that was crafted by their lawyer because they don't want to admit legal liability here, but I think that's going to be a tough argument to make. You're talking about 14 children, 6 deaths, and you're talking about children with cancer, children with heart conditions, lung conditions. It's like the most vulnerable of vulnerable. And when you look at this, is this a punitive damage case? Is there evidence to suggest the hospital tried to cover it up? I think the plaintiffs are alleging there was like a pattern of intentional concealment. So we're talking about more than just, hey, we knew about this, we didn't do anything.
And the question is, if it was concealed, who was responsible for that? My question for you is, moving on from this particular class action suit, let's just theoretically say, if you could prove expressly that someone knew that this was present and that it was potentially leading to the harming of children, is there any criminal potential here or no?
I think that's possible, but you would have to show intent, that the hospital actually intended to harm the children, and I don't think that's what we'll find here.
Right.
But we will find, and I read some of the evidence, that they knew about it. They can't deny in 2005 that they didn't have knowledge about it. They were sued, they were presented with these studies, and in fact, they admit that they knew. In the press conference, they admitted it. So why didn't you take any measures to prevent these other children from getting sick? Like I said, punitive damage case, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in exposure for the hospital here, not to mention the horrible PR. I mean, when you look at the history of this hospital, and I think the emails and the various communications will all come out in discovery in this case, and it's just not going to bode well for the hospital.